everybody all at once. This is a continuation of my series of video blogs called You Sleeping Fans of Rock, The Death, Decline, Destruction, and Resurrection of Rock and Roll. I'm going to wrap up the section about all the catch-22s that rock bands face and conclude this section with a few more statements about what rock bands face. And then after that, we'll go into the positive videos about what can be done to change the situation and fix rock and roll. So economic catch-22s pile up for rock bands until they become a load of self-exploitation so great that it destroys the band. Bands are expected to wear every hat, to reinvent the wheel of self-promotion, to do it without the infrastructure of support from booking agents or management or record labels, all of which have been virtualized out of existence by this nefarious robber baron social networking elite. And every liability is assumed by the band. There is no grants, there is no foundation, no endowment, no public money, no labor unions, no support that every other form of economic activity manages to acquire ancillary support for its economic activities. Rock is forced to exist without any ancillary support for its economic activities in an ever-shrinking marketplace that's been despoiled by social networking giants and by all the other catch-22s that I told you about. So bands have to self-exploit to such a degree in order to do all the jobs that need to be done that they are crushed under the weight of self-exploitation. And since we are living in a society colored by the values of ego and satanic secret societies, which love to sacrifice the most beautiful and talented male child to their demonic gods, the rock band, becomes a stand-in for this evil sacrifice, feeding the fans' dark need for blood sacrifice, and punishing the hubris of the artist who dares to become a creator god in his or her own right. So self-exploitation is one of the things that are driving bands out of business. One of the other factors that you have to take into consideration is the unique burden and obligation and difficulty that original rock bands face. We ask rock bands and songwriters and performers to do the most terrifying and productive work that you can do in America, under conditions of the greatest threat and the least support. So as I've outlined in these previous videos, we are asking bands to do the most difficult job, because rock is the most difficult job. To be an original rock band and to become iconic, become legendary, to become capable of writing a hit song, to be able to entertain an audience and to do it consistently and have a live show that works. These are the most difficult tasks, the most difficult creative job that a human could possibly do. In addition to that, all these toxic forces are arrayed against the artists and the bands in the music industry, so that we're asking them to essentially do this most difficult job under conditions of complete self-exploitation and toxic threat from the Illuminati, which, if they do succeed, are subject to conditions of rape, torture, mind control, and pedophilia and Satanism. So you're asking us to bare our souls, so-called, to open our psyche to the muse, to channel prophetic and intimate information about the human condition, while under these conditions of unbelievable toxic threat, hostility, and menace. Now, I am perfectly willing and able to be a hero for art and for rock and roll and for the people. And I understand that it is a heroic job to do. But all these extra catch-22s, all this sabotage, all this toxicity, all the Satanism and pedophilia and the evil surrounding rock music, that's got to stop. That's got to be cleansed, purged, washed away. And you, sleeping fans of rock, need to stop expecting artists to give blood, sweat, and truth under conditions that are impossible, that are unacceptable, immoral. You, sleeping fans of rock, expect artists to be equivalent of sex and entertainment slaves who will give you pleasure at the tap of a screen or a device, and then you consign them to the fate of cattle, to be butchered, their assets stripped, to be blood sacrificed by the music industry you are feeding off of. And you feel entitled to take our children, i.e. our songs, of the rock bands and songwriters virtually for free. You want our children, our songs, virtually for free. And you have multiple generations of people growing up in a culture in which music is not valued, in which music is seen as even worth less than the commodities of the water that your utility brings you or electricity. You pay virtually nothing now for music. And you expect that you are entitled to that. That all the work and sacrifice that you ask us rock bands and songwriters to endure at the fate of this brutal satanic music industry and ruthless, endless series of economic catch-22s that sabotage our ability to be artists. And then you want it for free. You expect artists to be equivalent to sex and entertainment slaves who will give you pleasure at the tap of a screen, and then you consign them to the fate of cattle, to be butchered and their assets stripped, their intellectual property to be stolen from them, and for them to be even blood sacrificed, i.e. assassinated, as I outlined in the Death of Art timeline. A systematic procession of targeted assassinations and separating the star from the band. And you feel entitled to take our songs, our children, virtually for free, or through systems that pay very little to the artist. I'm putting you, sleeping fans of rock, on notice of your complicity in the terrible fate of rock bands and rock music in our world today, so you can never plead ignorance anymore. I want to remind you one more time about the difficulty that original rock bands face. And I want you to try to put yourself in the shoes of an artist, of a singer-songwriter in a rock band, and realize that come what may, you have to come up to the level of songwriting and greatness of Led Zeppelin, or the Beach Boys, or Jimi Hendrix, or Steely Dan, or the Minutemen, or Dinosaur Jr., or Nirvana, or Soundgarden, or Alice in Chains, or Stone Temple Pilots. I want you to imagine for a moment how difficult it is to stand on the shoulders of giants and be one of those giants and make an original contribution to rock and roll such that rock and roll can survive into the future and continue to stay relevant and continue to be great. Can you imagine what it would take to stand on the shoulders of those giants, to aspire to be like Queen or Pink Floyd? Can you imagine how terrifying that would be for any person, for any artist, to have to come up to that standard? Even there's hundreds of other artists below that standard that would still be terrifying, even to be as good as Weezer or the Pixies. To be as good as that in songwriting. Think about that. How difficult that is. Other than parenting, that is the most difficult job in the world. There is no climb more difficult, nor any set of judges more critical, severe, and demanding than those encountered when you aspire to be as great as any of the greats of rock and roll. And yet we expect our new and upcoming bands to face this terror and this seemingly impossible task in an environment of horrible, vicious threat and endless economic catch-22s and sabotage. Do you think it would help them in this endeavor if society chose not to heap more onerous and unfair obstacles upon them? So this concludes my critique of all the problems of rock and roll. And I'm putting it in your lap, you sleeping fans of rock, to wake up. Don't take rock bands for granted. Take very seriously their contribution to society and the fact that if we survive Donald Trump, and he does what it seems he might do, which is destroy the cabal and the globalist agenda to depopulate our planet and enslave the remainder, then we are going to have a planet of free people on our hands. And we, America, are going to be in competition with every other nation in the world for economic and cultural power and prestige. And at the end of the day, it will not matter as much how much steel or how many automobiles or how much soybeans America produces versus what other countries have produced, because that's not as exciting as the fact that America is the preeminent creator and distributor and originator of rock and roll in the world and forever shall be. And America must seize its legacy and its obligation to make itself great again by making damn well sure that rock bands don't fall through the cracks.